This episode is sponsored by Hired.com. Are you searching for a new job? That can be stressful, scary, and time-consuming. Pushy recruiters try to sell you on roles you don't actually want, and the job boards make you feel like you're throwing your resume into a black hole, never to be seen again. And sometimes you go all the way through the interview process just to find out at the very end that the salary, offer, or company culture doesn't match what you're looking for. Hired is the world's most intelligent talent matching platform for full-time and contract opportunities in engineering, development, design, product management, data science, sales, and marketing. We make your job search faster, focused, and stress-free. Instead of endlessly applying to companies and hoping for the best, Hired puts you in control of when and how you connect with compelling new opportunities. After completing one simple application, top employers apply to hire you, and on Hired you receive personal interview requests and upfront salary information so you can make informed decisions about what opportunities to pursue over a condensed timeline. Hired offers access to more than 4,000 innovative employers, including big brand names like Facebook and smaller emerging startups. The size and type of company you want to connect with is totally up to you. And we help you find new opportunities in 17 major cities in North America, Europe, Asia, and Australia. Open to relocation? Let them know. Your privacy and autonomy in your job search is of utmost importance, and if you go check them out at the show's link, that's hire.com/JavaScriptJabber, you can get double the hiring bonus that they offer. That's $600 instead of $300. So go check them out at hire.com/JavaScriptJabber today. Hey everybody, and welcome to another live from Microsoft Build JavaScript Jabber show. This week on our panel we have AJ O'Neill.
Yo, 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 coming at you live from Microsoft Build.
I'm Charles Max Wood from devchat.tv, and this week we have two special guests. We have Mike Ammerlaan. Did I say that right?
Yeah,
Ammerlaan.
That's right.
And Vesa Juvonen.
Concentrating. Good. Juvonent. Pretty close. Yeah.
Do you want to introduce yourselves really quickly? Just talk about who you are, kind of what your history is, what you're working on.
Yeah. So I'm Mike Ammerlaan. I work on the Office ecosystem marketing team. So I work on SharePoint and OneDrive and a couple other products. But before that, I used to be a program manager on a number of products like SharePoint, Bing Maps, doing the various APIs and developer extensibility points. So yeah, I've got kind of a long history at Microsoft, like 16 years and a number of different products.
Gotcha.
And my name is Vesa Juvonen. I'm a senior program manager in the SharePoint Splat team, which essentially is responsible of SharePoint Framework, which is the new modern web stack-based development framework for SharePoint. I've been in Microsoft for roughly 11 years, probably been in a field consultant, all of that. I run the community stuff, development documentation, all up SharePoint development guidance. So that's on my responsibility.
Gotcha. So when you talk about the SharePoint framework, you're talking about ways of writing extensions to SharePoint?
Correct, absolutely.
With JavaScript in particular?
Yes. Yeah, so SharePoint framework is all about, SharePoint has been kind of this different beast. In the past, you were writing server-side farm solutions, and not that many people actually know what it actually even means. And it has been done kind of a unique way of extending SharePoint. Now we're kind of modernizing the customization story on SharePoint, making it aligned with the industry standards. You're doing web stack development, Yeoman templates, JavaScript development, and then you customize SharePoint UI by providing client-side web parts. And in this week in Build, we announced a few additional endpoints as well. So it's not just about web parts, also elements in the UI, in the SharePoint, and all of that.
And I mean, in SharePoint, there's always been a long history of like people putting JavaScript into it through like content editor web parts and script editor web parts and even front page and SharePoint Designer. But SharePoint Framework is really this sort of consolidation to make it a lot more easy to bring in frameworks to code it with full engineering tools, get them into SharePoint.
Yep. Okay, so backing up just a second. What is SharePoint?
I was going to say, some of our listeners are probably not as familiar with the Microsoft ecosystem, so yeah.
Yeah, so SharePoint is basically our web server, technology, and now in Office 365, where what it provides are file sharing services, and it also provides team sites, communication sites, intranet portals for companies. So if you're at a company and you want to have a way to communicate out to your teams, you'll set up SharePoint. It's part of Office 365. You build out web pages. You use these things called web parts, which are just blocks that you can put onto the page to customize.
Widgets is a good example.
Is a great analogy. Yeah. So that you can get the right tools to the right people through websites.
Okay, so let me try to break this down in the dumb way I think I'm understanding it. So you take Facebook plus Google Drive and you break it down into widgets that you can copy and paste a snippet into a page and say this thing goes here and that thing goes there to build the interface with the components that you want on that particular page, scoped to a group that you want.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
So that's really been the kind of a power of SharePoint in the past as well. It's essentially a composite set of composite building blocks. So you can actually take whatever web parts, you design the UI, choose which web part are visible, what data is being shown, and then you essentially invite your audience to that page. Yeah. And you can modify that anyway, anytime you want. And we're still based, the modern SharePoint is still based on the same thinking, but the implementation is now being modernized finally to the right level.
So is SharePoint something that is on-prem as well as in Azure, or is it like Azure only?
So it's got
all of them.
Yeah, it's got on-premises products. SharePoint Server 2013, 2016 is the latest version that people can deploy on premises. But yeah, as part of Office 365, we also have SharePoint offered as part of that. It integrates with things like Azure Active Directory, but it's its own hosted offering as part of Office 365.
Okay. It has the kind of an on-premises background. So it used to be a server-side product in on-premises. You install that on a Windows server. Then you can absolutely host those Windows servers in Azure, but it's an IIS installation. And then SharePoint Online is in the Office 365 as a service, so you don't need to worry about that backend thingy is what people used to worry about. So.
Right, gotcha. So I'm trying to envision then, what kinds of things are people building with the SharePoint framework? AJ mentioned widgets and things like that. So are these custom designed widgets, or do they add other capabilities, say integrations to SharePoint, all of the above? There's other stuff I didn't even mention. I'm just wondering,
It's basically all of above, because SharePoint is an intranet platform or collaboration site platform. So then it comes really down on the business requirements. What do you want to have within your global front page of your global intranet? So quite often these global customers, they use group policies to set the welcome page of the browser to point to their intranet, which is an understandable scenario in larger deployments. And then it's up to the corporate communications to define what do we actually want to communicate to our end users or our employees. Or then when we collaborate, when we have projects, you want to have some sort of a space to share stuff, which is getting synced on your mobile devices as well. News on that project and all of that. How do you do that? And then you standardize those, you provision those sites. That's how it basically works.
So we see people, bring in things like dashboards to report on, for example, the issues that are assigned to their team or maybe across the company. There's a number of web parts for that. Sometimes people build like miniature applications, so just tracking like who's going to be off for the next 3 weeks. You can store the data inside of a SharePoint list. You can then render it out.
Or store them in Azure as well.
Or in Azure as well. You can connect to a web service. SharePoint also has a ton of documents in there, so people store their repositories of documents that they have on their teams, and so a lot of times people will build like reporting solutions on top of that and roll that up and put it inside of a web part so that people get a concise summary.
So when I for some reason the term web dev is coming to mind. What is web dev related to this, and what is it?
Web dev in the sense that developers building web, applications and those kinds of things?
I don't know. I don't know what web dev is.
You're like SharePoint web dev.
So web dev, was a protocol for accessing files, and SharePoint implemented web dev. And so historically, you could, for example, use web dev under the covers to access it. If you're in a Windows environment, like a file share, there's a lot of things that use web dev. And I think we still fully support web dev, but there's, of course, other APIs and protocols for getting stuff into and out of SharePoint. But web dev was one of the ways. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So one of the things that I'm seeing, you mentioned, or we talked a little bit about integrations, for example. And in a lot of cases, a lot of the apps that I've built, I want some of the integration to happen on the browser and some of it to happen on the server.
Yes.
So if I'm doing something like that, do I have to write essentially two plugins, one that works on the front end and one that works on the back end to manage data, or how does that happen?
How you would build that with the SharePoint framework, or actually using the classic models as well, is that you concentrate obviously on a UI, you implement that using JavaScript. You can use React, Angular, Mustache. It doesn't really matter what you're using, which is absolutely fine. Then that client-side implementation would call a web API or a web service hosted in Azure or somewhere else. If it's in Azure, you can actually use authentication and authorization through that pipeline. If it's in somewhere else, then we need to come up with the clever ways of securing that communication. But then that web API can call back on the SharePoint and do operations, elevation of privileges or whatever, these kind of operations. You have a JavaScript, it calls Web API, then it's up to the Web API what it's actually doing. Using the Azure technologies, it could call back on premises to get data from LOB systems and present that in the cloud, or there's endless possibilities. Hopefully that answers your question.
I think so. Let me see if I can restate it in a way that makes sense to me anyway.
Yeah.
So essentially what you're saying is that if I need that backend component, it needs to talk to something in a secure way, and I don't want to store like API keys or credentials or tokens in the browser, then I'd have to create my own backend somewhere. I could put it on Azure, I could put it somewhere else, but then I, as the extension developer, am responsible for managing and securing that data and managing and securing the calls then to the third-party system, be it an LOB or line of business app or something completely different.
Correct. Yeah. That's basically the model. And we're kind of, if we think about this from a, let's say, SharePoint developer perspective, this is, the SharePoint developers used to write managed code, just managed code on the server, because that was the way how we extended SharePoint. And those people, a lot of them are absolutely fine of writing stuff in the Azure as a web API or in the backend of Azure. Then we need actually those, this may be a bad term, but new age developers, in quotes, who are actually the web stack developers. They understand how to use JavaScript frameworks properly. We need them on the UI layer. So we kind of need multiple, let's say, skill sets. You can have all of those skill sets by yourself. That's fine. You can divide those within your projects. That's fine as well. Typically, there are slightly different developers, might be. I don't know.
The other question that I'm wondering about, so you mentioned SharePoint on mobile. Now, do you just access that through a mobile browser? Or do you have like SharePoint app that you can run? And if so, how do the extensions work there?
So the modern SharePoint and the modern SharePoint and SharePoint Online, we do have a native mobile app as well. And our extensibility story, the really key point of this modern extensibility is that those customizations, essentially those widgets, which we call web parts, work also through that native mobile application, through iPhone or iPad or Android and so on. And in the old implementation, that wasn't possible. In the new implementation, that works. You can also use any device to access the web browser or to use web browser to get in, and the experience is fully responsive, like it should be. It's 2017. So
So how would I go about, let's say that I build, actually, let me ask a different question first. So I have an Angular show as well. And I'm assuming that, we have a lot of listeners that use Angular, a lot of listeners that use React. You said you can build those in, you can use those as part of your extension. I guess my question is, are there components or other libraries that make this easy to do with Angular or React, where I just essentially import an ES6, run my build tool, and then, oh, hey, I don't actually have to build some of these common elements myself?
Yep. Good. Excellent question. So we give you Juvonent templates which will scaffold the basic structure for you, and those are pretty simple of us as a starting point. We in Microsoft, we use React due to numerous reasons, widely in Office 365, and we have an open source initiative which is Office UI Fabric React components. Which is a set of controls and components which you can use within your implementation, essentially providing you the same UI elements as we have in the SharePoint Online or in Office 365.
And we're using it in our own platform.
And we are using that in our own platform. That's really one of the key points of SharePoint Framework. We are building our own UIs using the same framework. So you as a third-party developer get access on exactly the same stack, rather than us keeping something on our side. Now, React is our chosen model. That doesn't mean that you need to write stuff in React. You can use whatever library you want. Angular is fine, especially Angular 1.x. Now, 1.x is pretty old. The challenge with the newer Angular versions is mainly that they're designed for a single-page application, and in a way that it's a one Angular application per page. Now with SharePoint, mostly, let's put it this way. That's the main design thinking. Let's put it this way.
Yeah, there's a lot. There's
a ways to go around that, and you can actually do that in SharePoint as well. But with SharePoint, you typically have, let's say, 5 to 6 of those web parts or widgets, whatever we kind of call them, on a one page.
Right.
So you have that isolation. You need to think through how do you implement that. And Angular does work, but you need to think through how do you do that isolation on your site. But we're working.
There are certain things that I don't know how you would do if you have more than one application on a page.
Yes.
For example, drag and drop.
Yep.
Because you have to listen on document.body in order to do drag and drop.
Exactly those limitations which we have. Now, we are working together with Google on trying to solve this. We're having let's say, constant discussions. Kind of trying to figure out, and they will take our feedback in for the following versions, and also we are having that internal. Well, it's not an internal discussion when we have meetings with Google, but anyway, which is pretty weird when you think of it. It's Microsoft having discussions with Google how to do stuff together, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, it's not that crazy. I mean, I've talked to plenty of people.
No, it's not that crazy anymore. No.
Right.
When I started in Microsoft, that was like, what? So
yeah, I've made friends with people who work on TypeScript, and also people who work on Angular, and those folks talk all the time, and it's really not that strange anymore. To it's like, oh, hey, look, we're building synergy, it makes the web better, and it's a good thing.
Absolutely.
So one of the things that I'm concerned about then is it sounds like there's not really a whole lot of sandboxing or name spacing or things like that. AJ pointed out, drag and drop, you have to listen on document.body. So if I pull in, an older version of React than what you're using in SharePoint, or if I bring something in and my widget has a bug in it that affects the way the entire page operates, can somebody cause some real problems there? And is there a way to protect yourself from that as you build these out?
So I would say that there's no kind of right now in the framework, we also don't have a native isolations of this implementation, but that's pretty much impossible when I think of it. It's a one page where we have multiple JavaScript components. We're looking into improving that. We have a lot of guidance available which will help to implement these things in the right way, that they're isolated. React works pretty well on that one. On the approach of the isolation, but it is a classic challenge, no doubt, and we are absolutely aware of the challenge and how do we isolate those things which are running on a page.
And we do have additional tools through add-in models and those kinds of things to actually bring certain components. Like if you've got your application implemented in a web page, you can implement it in with what we call add-ins as a web part on the page. That's essentially iframing it in, but we do more to give you like an authentication token so you can call APIs.
And then it's fully isolated.
Then it's fully isolated in that case. So that there is that tool in our quiver, if you will, or toolbox. But yeah,
I guess the thing that I really envision as possibly a problem that seems the most likely scenario is not that, okay, there's somebody malicious on the page, so much as I'm pulling something in and I name it the same as somebody else. Or I I create something on the page and for whatever reason it collides with code from another part of the page.
And well, now if you go back on the, let's say, fundamentals of SharePoint, it's not like a random end user who got a project site who's gonna just drag and drop JavaScript on it. That's not how it actually works. It's an enterprise product, and to be able to get those client-side web parts in, you actually need to go through a small approval, relatively simple process, but essentially making sure that things are okay.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So you have that centralized control. You're able to disable all of the web parts across the whole installation. There might be hundreds of thousands of instances of your web part running in one tenant. You're able to disable them with a one switch as well. So we have kind of a centralized control. It's slightly different than just drag and drop in JavaScript on a page, which we do not allow actually anymore in SharePoint. We used to do that, but that has then other implications and challenges.
Right. So one other thing that I'm wondering about is, let's say that I decide, you know what, this sounds really great. I'm an independent developer, but I want to go ahead and build some widgets for SharePoint. Maybe I talk to somebody, and I have talked to somebody and had them basically say, if I wanted to make real money, I'd go build widgets for SharePoint. Because, these companies rely on it. It's kind of a central place for a lot of information. And they'll pay a fair bit of money because it solves a real problem for them that can potentially save them thousands, tens of thousands of dollars. So let's say that I'm like seeing dollar signs and I'm like, I want to go do this. Is there a way for me to get started on this without dropping a whole bunch of money on like a SitePoint installation? And
Yes.
Yeah, so I mean, so one of the things we have is something called the SharePoint Store. So that's actually, through that add-in model that I mentioned earlier, you can basically build, things through websites, through web pages. You can also have it hosted inside of SharePoint to sort of bundle in all the various scripts. And then you can offer that through the store. You can, basically charge money for it. And so then that's made available and made more discoverable to everyone across SharePoint to go, find those add-ins, go install them, and then go use them inside of their sites.
Right. And pay license fees on the add-ins, all of that. So
that's right. So there's a full store for that. Using those add-ins, you have the full power of everything you can build. It gets framed in or hosted on SharePoint. That's one option. And then, of course, a lot of our customers are, big companies. They're working to deploy applications, and so there's a lot of folks who work towards that, basically just building out SharePoint sites, building out applications, integrations. That's another way to go as well.
But the second dimension on your question was around, okay, I'm an independent developer. What do I need to invest to get actually something on a SharePoint? Do I need to base something or anything? And the answer is no. So you can actually, as a SharePoint, as a developer, you can go to the dev.office.com where you can request a free developer tenant. You will get a kind of a completely fully functional E3 licensed tenant, which doesn't probably mean a thing for many of us, but it's almost like a real tenant. It has 25 accounts essentially on it, so you can play around with the higher permissions, lower permissions.
Right.
You can do testing on that one. And then it's just a matter of getting your customization deployed to the tenant. So tenant side covered. For the tooling itself, Juvonent templates, everything else available in NPM, just pull them down, Visual Studio Code, or whatever is your preference as a developer tooling, absolutely works as well. If you want to do Visual Studio IDE development, technically that works as well. All of those has a free version available for the community.
Right.
So you can get all of the tools, all of the access to the platform for free. And then develop your widget, put it in a store, and hopefully make a lot of money out of it.
Yeah. One other thing I'm just going to break in real quick and kind of address, I think I said SitePoint a few times instead of SharePoint.
No worries.
Yeah, it's a long week, no worries.
Yeah, no kidding. So let's say I get SharePoint set up. I've got some accounts set up. I'm getting ready to start fiddling with this. So do I just go npm install the Juvonent templates and download your JavaScript and kind of
exactly that. Yeah, it's on dev.office.com/SharePoint. But yeah, it's exactly that. You just go install the Juvonent templates. You install tools for Gulp, and you can get started. We actually have debug tools that run locally, so you don't even have to have that developer tenancy, even though it's free. You don't even have to have that. You can get started in about 10-20 minutes. Building stuff.
Is there any kind of automated testing that you can set up on this, or
you can, or let's put it this way: we do have a unit testing on the JavaScript level,
right.
So you can do some level. It's not this is pretty early. We went GA with SharePoint Framework 2 months ago.
Yeah.
On the following releases, which are coming pretty soon, we're adding new capabilities all the time. And one of the things where we're investing also is the better unit testing capabilities as well. But that's unit testing in JavaScript. Can I do automated testing in UIs? That's getting slightly more complex because you need to sign in to Office 365.
Yeah.
Theoretically possible, people do that in a larger scale though. It's not a one developer approach though.
Gotcha. Do people ever build their own private SharePoint plugins that only they use? Like they don't put them into the store, they don't open it up?
Yes. Oh, yeah. So one of the big, the reason why SharePoint is a multi-billion-dollar business is the fact that enterprises are using them. And quite often enterprises do not want their random employees to pull down stuff from the store. Because that might theoretically even break something, even though that's, technically no, but it causes inconsistency across the sites. And that's what the enterprises do not like at all, or mid-sized and larger enterprises. And that means that the customizations have to get deployed without the store, and you can absolutely do that. So you, as long as you have a tenant, you have an alternative way of getting your customization deployed and to be available for your end users within the tenant. So all of that is kind of taken care of. SharePoint is kind of the background is really on the enterprise development and on the enterprise usage. And that's why the enterprise thinking is pretty far on the controls and compliance and all of that. But you don't have to be an enterprise developer. You can do store stuff. We're looking into right now that the store is only for SharePoint add-ins. which is a slightly older development model. Fully supported, we'll keep on evolving that as well. But SharePoint Framework, when you create that widget, technically it works slightly differently. So the store for SharePoint Framework widgets, it's not yet there. It's coming as well. We're looking into enabling that scenario within the store side as well. Yep. And getting those customizations nicely deployed across all of the tenants.
Yeah, but I would definitely say that most of the customizations people are building with the add-ins or with SharePoint Framework, it's for the company. It's maybe specific to their custom systems. So that's probably where a lot of the development happens, really.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Obviously, there is a big opportunity when you think of it in the SharePoint store and Office store as well. We did approach the 100 million SharePoint or Office 365.
Office 365.
Office 365 subscriptions. 100 million
it's commercial monthly users.
Yeah,
but yeah.
Okay. Oh, yes. Monthly active users. Yeah.
Yes.
This episode is sponsored by Rollbar. One of the frustrating things about being a developer is dealing with errors. Relying on users to report errors, digging through log files to try debugging issues, or a million alerts flooding your inbox ruining your day. With Rollbar's full stack error monitoring, you get the context, insights, and control you need to find and fix bugs faster. It's easy to install, and you can start tracking production errors and deployments in 8 minutes or less. We have a special offer for JavaScript Jabber listeners. Go to rollbar.com/JSJabber and sign up to get the Bootstrap plan free for 90 days. That's 300,000 errors tracked for free. Loved by developers at awesome companies like Heroku, Twilio, Kayak, Instacart, Zendesk, Twitch, and more. Give Rollbar a try today. Go to rollbar.com/JSJabber.
What is the relationship between Office 365 and SharePoint? Is it because it seems like Office 365 was something that was more consumerish, and SharePoint's been more enterprisey, and they're coming together in a single product, or?
Well, I would say Office 365 is used, a lot in enterprises. It really is sort of enterprise.
Well, sure.
But
it's not. Office 365 is something that someone down at the lower level is going to be interacting with.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
It's like the secretary and the developer, and like it's not just business tools.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it brings your Word, your Excel, your Outlook, all those kinds of tools to get your job done. And SharePoint is, it brings the file storage along with that. So when you want to save your documents up, it's the place where you'll store them. When you sort of start your day and you say, what's the team working on? You'll go visit a SharePoint webpage to see, okay, here's maybe some tasks, or here's some recently updated documents I should go take a look at. So it provides that kind of backbone across Office 365 for file storage, for websites, those kinds of things.
And so what's the relationship between OneDrive and Office 365 and OneDrive and SharePoint?
Great question. OneDrive is basically provides the file storage for an individual. So for a place to go stash my files up in a place, maybe share them out with folks, but just make them available so that they're in the cloud so I can always get them across devices. It's kind of for your personal storage of files, and for putting those in the cloud. SharePoint is the place where you have documents that are, made available to a team. So if you've got your specifications that you're working on for your next project, you want people to review that, you can start in OneDrive, you can have the document there, you can then, maybe share it out through SharePoint and move it into SharePoint so it's available to everyone. Under the covers, it's basically the same technology. We have the same APIs, so you can access it in the same way through Microsoft Graph. So, we're really kind of the shared team. So we're developing a lot of shared technologies like that. But OneDrive is more the personal, SharePoint's more the team focused.
And coming back on the relationship on the bigger Office 365, when you think of it, if you sign in within your browser to your Office 365 tenant, you will get an app launcher on the top left corner. If you click that, you will see all of the different services available within your Office 365. There's Mail, there's Planner,
Word,
there's
Excel,
Word,
Microsoft
Excel,
Teams.
Microsoft Teams is one of them, and one of them is SharePoint. So SharePoint has some long history in on-premises. It's one of those things which didn't actually born in cloud. It actually was born way before, back in 2001 in on-premises, or even before that with a different name. But then it was superbly and unexpectedly successful in on-premises, and obviously people wanted to start reducing the operational cost and maintenance costs in on-premises. We wanted to put it in the cloud, and that's how SharePoint eventually got it to the cloud as well. And for some people, even the SharePoint name sounds like legacy. It sounds old. It's been around. It's something what my mom and dad used to do, or whatever. 2001. Come on.
Sure.
So it's
right.
possible. It's possible.
That's true.
So, but I think so. Obviously, the term itself, the SharePoint has a lot of, let's say, historical feelings, historical images, everything else. And now, really the big thing, what we're trying to do and what we're aiming to do, and we're pretty confident, and we are confident that,
the confidence is very pretty. It's
yes, exactly.
It's got right curves in the right places, the right colors.
Exactly.
The prettiest.
But we're modernizing the way people can actually use the SharePoint is a big deal. There's millions of people who are using SharePoint in cloud or in on-premises. Now we want to modernize the UI. We want the developers to be able to take advantage on the modern ways of doing that. JavaScript is no doubt the way how people are working. It has a massive opportunity for developers, massive opportunity for customers and enterprises as well, getting access on, hey, nice UIs, it's working fluently and all of that.
Yeah. So I guess my question, somewhat related to, AJ talking about Office and stuff, and we talked to the Office folks
add-ins
about,
guys, okay.
Yeah, they're add-ins, but it sounds like that, they are at least loosely tied together. So, I mean, what are the capabilities of the APIs that you're providing? Because we're not dealing with now Word documents and PowerPoint presentations and things like that. We're talking about maybe moving files around or creating tasks or...
Well, yeah, so SharePoint has it provides different kind of lists and functionalities with the underlying service. So you can track tasks, you can track any items. So SharePoint list is essentially oversimplifying things. It's a dynamic relational database table. So you can actually decide what is your business object which you're storing within a SharePoint list. Our APIs are essentially... The API surface in SharePoint is massive from a REST API and remote API perspective. You're able to modify, create lists, data objects, individual attributes on those data objects, which would be items in a list, create different kind of lists, different functionalities, put your web parts on a page, modify the pages, modify the branding experience, and all of that. So.
And the SharePoint lists are pretty programmable themselves. So on the back end, you can connect them with webhooks or also integrate them into workflow products. So, on the front end, you're sort of connecting to a list, you're updating them through REST APIs. On the back end, you can tie into those list item changes and do a lot of things as well.
Sure.
Yeah.
So if you think about, let's say, Office client, they're kind of expanding all the time. They're adding button options here and there. And the panel option on right, you can do something maybe on the context of a document. So with SharePoint, it's slightly different story because the SharePoint customization comes from an approach where we used to do massive, let's say, we modified the whole UI of SharePoint in on-premises by deploying completely new assemblies on servers and all of that in on-premises. And when we went to the cloud, we cannot allow you to do that because then you compromise the service.
Right.
And now we're kind of adapting then an alternative way of modifying those experiences, the whole UI. But it's not limited like within Office Client.
Right.
On the other hand, Office Client is more specific. Yeah. If you have a Word, you're actually writing something. If you have an Excel, it's a specific thing. SharePoint is kind of it's set of Lego blocks, and then you can build whatever you want on top of it.
Yeah, I mean, in an Office, the scenario is you're building custom tools to, maybe have something inside of, Word or Excel sort of work in a different way or tailored to, the accounting or something that you're trying to do.
Yeah.
Whereas with SharePoint, it's, hey, I need to get this dashboard in front of people. So SharePoint is kind of this conveyance almost. It's just this way for, folks who are using it to compose these experiences and then get it out. So it's more about, you're presenting tools to the public through SharePoint rather than just building tools for the sake of making SharePoint better, so to speak.
So
you have a set of managed data and then you have a set of managed views on the data.
Yes. Yeah. Well, that's one way of thinking that as well. Absolutely.
So it sounds like SharePoint, from the API perspective, is a layer of scopes and authorization on data and teams.
Right.
So you're taking pretty much arbitrary buckets of data and saying this data type is a list type or is a grid type or is a graph type or is a something type or a Word type or an Excel type and funneling it through scope of users, applications, permissions.
I mean, good way of putting that. Yeah, without the Microsoft wording and all of that. So
maybe I'll try this. Basically, you can think of SharePoint.
You're the marketing guy. You need to explain.
Well, you can think of SharePoint as just a hierarchy of sites, right? Like I've got my marketing department, and then I've got my Northwest District department, and then I've got maybe the sort of the Washington district, and so you've got this hierarchy of sites. and you can sort of hook into each level in that hierarchy. And then for each level, you have this concept called lists. And like as Vesa mentioned, they're simplified kind of database tables. And there's one variant of lists called a library, which basically just has all those Word documents, Excel files, and all that kind of stuff within it. So if you want, you can then also manipulate those Word files, those Excel files, and the metadata around them as well in addition. So hierarchy of sites, lists and libraries at every level that you can hook into. And then each level of sites also has its own set of pages that you can extend with parts.
Okay, so it's not quite as generic as the way I was describing it, but similar.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
it is, now that you're actually asking that question, it is a really hard product to explain without actually having any previous knowledge about SharePoint.
Right.
That's a fair point. Because it's an open canvas, essentially.
Yeah.
You can do whatever you want with it. So, but it has certain limitations as well. So.
It's a business intelligence database for designing UI to performance 10x at planet scale.
yeah,
It can be that as well, absolutely.
I think you left a few buzzwords out of that, AJ.
Well, I couldn't say both world scale and planet scale, so I had to pick one.
Yeah.
We like to think of it as planet scale, but yeah.
So are there any good tutorials out there for this? I mean, I think you mentioned, dev.office.com?
Yeah, dev.office.com/SharePoint is our essentially source for all of the development documentation. How to get started, step-by-step guidance on what do I need to install on my machine, Mac, Windows, doesn't matter. Videos, how to get started on things, and all of that is available. Tutorials, samples, the whole game.
So, and we've got, as I mentioned, like a 10 to 20 minute walkthrough of just, you can go run it today and don't need anything exotic.
Yep. And that location links to YouTube channel where we have videos showing the same stuff. Again, up to you, how do you want to learn the stuff.
Nice. And the framework is on GitHub?
The SharePoint framework is not currently open source. So we're looking into opening first bits and pieces on the SharePoint framework, so fully open source, like the rest of the organizations in Microsoft. Everybody is looking into how to do that. And sooner or later, it most likely will happen, but we need to get some standard basic grounds out, and then we'll start rolling out the open source pieces as well. We know that we need to open source Juvonent templates. That's pretty obvious. We need to open source other stuff as well.
But on github.com/SharePoint, there is a number of SharePoint framework samples across a number of different JavaScript frameworks. Also our documentation is open source, but there's a ton of samples on github.com/SharePoint.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, do you have any other questions, AJ?
Not related to this topic.
All right. Well, we will hold those until after we're done then. We have one last segment of the show that we do, and that's picks.
Have you ever felt like you're falling behind, or that the programming world is moving so fast that it's impossible to keep up? Then there's the issue of where to go to make sure you're up to date. The answer is to join a community dedicated to discussing the latest in JavaScript. I mean, wouldn't it be nice if you got JavaScript jabber all day? Well, you can, kind of. We've created a Slack community for JavaScript jabber. That means that you can connect with our listeners and guests on a platform you're most likely already using. Plus, we've set up a Keeping Current channel that pulls stories from across the web to help you know what people are talking about. And coming soon, we'll be holding monthly webinars and roundtable video chats to connect with experts in the community and with each other. So come join us at javascriptjabber.com/Slack.
I'll jump in with a few picks. So when I come to these shows, I'm going to pick some things that I've picked on the show before and some things I haven't. But when I come to these shows, I like to follow up with people, right? So the people that we've talked to during the episodes, I mean, I don't always have contact information for. Depends on if I get a business card. But like, I went around and talked to a whole bunch of people out there on the show floor, both from Microsoft and from some of the vendors that are out there. And I use a tool called BlueTick to follow up. Now it's in beta, so if you go to bluetick.io and you're thinking, oh, this looks great, I want to try it, you sign up for a free trial, you get on a Skype call with Mike, who's the guy that's building it, and then he kind of walks you through it in about a half hour. Mike's a friend of mine, so that's kind of how I got into it, but it is terrific. And so it's really simple. You create sequences. The sequences have emails in them. Hooks into Zapier for a lot of the automation at this point. Like if I send an email to one of these gentlemen and I said, hey, let's hop on a call and talk about SharePoint, then I have like 3 or 4 follow-up emails, right, in my sequence. But if you went in and actually signed up for a spot to talk to me on schedule once, then it kicks you out of the sequence so you don't get the reminders. which is something that I've been looking for a CRM that does that. And surprisingly, I hadn't been able to find one.
Yeah.
So just that, stuff like that, it's really cool. So I really, really like that. Another one, I used moo.com for my business cards. And yes, I know you listeners can't see my business cards, but I had them in my pocket. Anyway, they're Space Invaders business cards. And anyway, so it kind of fun design. It was something I needed quick. So,
yeah, I've used moo.com. Yeah, it's really cool.
So I'm going to pick moo.com as well. And
nice.
I need one of these, Chuck.
I know, right?
Oh,
I see a line coming down from an alien, which gives my little Space Invader shooter a little stress there. But
yeah. So anyway, it's just fun stuff. And then the last thing that I have, and this is more just general advice for conferences and shows like this, is take the time to go talk to people. It's funny because I talk to a lot of people and they're like, yeah, I went to the conference and I went to all the sessions and I learned a bunch of stuff, but I didn't really meet anybody. And you're missing out if you're not doing that. A lot of the conferences, you can go watch the sessions afterward. So, I mean, unless there's something that's really pressing that you want to go and talk to the speaker afterward, where it's, I'm really struggling with this piece and I need help with it, or the app I'm working on has whatever you're talking about and is broken, I tend to encourage people to go talk to people. And it's just been really great to go and meet some of these folks and see what's going on. And there's a whole lot of interesting stuff out there. I mean, I see the big banner for artificial intelligence from where I'm sitting.
Yep.
And you don't think artificial intelligence and Microsoft, but at the same time, I mean, there are people over there who are experts in it, who, know all about the Microsoft tooling for it, the tooling in the cloud, the tooling that you can pull into your other stuff, building Skype bots and Slack bots and all the other cool stuff. And, the deep data science and data learning. And, so go out there and actually talk about it if it's even remotely interesting to you. It doesn't have to be something that your boss has told you, mandated, hey, we need more of this, go find out about it. Yeah, do that stuff too. But yeah, go see what else is out there, because these are kind of the opportunities that we have to really understand where the industry is going and what is going on out there. And, I realize that there are some things that we haven't really talked about on the show that I think are of interest to people that will benefit them in years to come. So we'll be talking about those too, but you just don't see those unless you go out there and actually meet people.
Quick comment actually on that one. I would just follow up on that one. Absolutely agree on that. And then even though you would be a kind of a JavaScript guy or you're a client-side guy, go and do something crazy. Go to a completely different session, which is not what you've been doing at all. Because then suddenly it will open up new ideas. And it's like, oh, that's an interesting thing. What if I would actually do... And that's how you get really innovative ideas, when you're cross-mixing the kind of topics and all of that.
Right.
And like you said, all of the build recordings are live in less than 24 hours from when it actually happened. The value is on the fact that we're sitting on booths. We're available for help. It's the engineering from all of these individual organizations. And if we can't solve that, we'll probably give you a business card and we'll follow up. So absolutely. Great advice.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing that I tell people too about conferences is, especially if you travel to one, I mean, go do the things that you can't do at home, right? So that includes going and seeing the sites. I've been to Seattle a couple of times, so I wasn't like, oh, I got to go see the Space Needle again. But
Tell me about it. Yeah.
But but at the same time, it's I mean, when are we going to be in the same place again? I mean, who knows, right? And then even then, have the opportunity to talk like this. So definitely, get out there and just find those opportunities. Go hack on something crazy in your hotel room. Yeah. Really love it. AJ, your picks?
Yeah, I do. Okay, so I'm going to pick the movie The Circle, and I really can't say anything about it other than that it may not be what you expect, and I was thought-provoked during the movie. I don't know that it's gotten particularly positive reviews, but I don't really care. I think it was a good movie all the same. I'm also going to pick, let's see, I don't know whether to call this spontaneity or happiness, or if there's a difference between the two, but I was walking down the street at the beginning of this week, and there was a woman about a full block ahead of me, and there's a sprinkler that takes care of the grass on the sidewalk, and it was broken, and so it was just like spouting up into the air. And so I'm a block, maybe a block and a half behind her, and she gets up to it and she stops. She looks at it the one way, she looks at it the other way, puts her hands on her hips, and stands there for about, I'd say, a full minute maybe, before she finally decides to just run through. And it just made me so happy. And I pretty much had caught up to her by the time she finally ran through. And so then I ran through too, because I was like, yeah. And so she hears me running behind her and looks back, and I just said, you inspired me. So I love it when you realize that your whole life you're still 12, and you get gray hair and wrinkles. I hear and see. I don't know. Well, I got a little bit of gray hair and a little bit of wrinkles. But anyway, we're always 12. And if you just approach life with just fun and love, then it'll make... There's some quote, something to the effect of, like, as you let the light that you have inside of you shine out, it gives other people to let their light shine as well, kind of thing. So that, whatever that sentiment is I'm trying to get at, I picked that. And along the same lines, I was at a community yard sale, and I love the book All the Places You'll Go by Dr. Seuss. Mm-hmm. And so there was this little book that said on the front cover, "Today is your day, your mountain is waiting, so get on your way." And I'm pretty sure that's a quote from, and it had Dr. Seuss on it. I'm pretty sure that's a quote from Oh, the Places You'll Go. And so I open it up, and it's actually a journal, but only the last entry is in it. Everything else has been ripped out. And so I read it. And it was just really interesting to me, some random person I don't know that's obviously grown up in the area where I'm living, or I guess actually that's not obvious. I don't know where they grew up. But anyway, there's some commonalities in culture, because we obviously both live in the same place since the thing showed up at this community yard sale. But just how much, like, a 20-year-old woman that's writing in it, and just like how much her thoughts about, like, some of her life experience and struggles that she was going through and realizations that she was having, like, reflect my own. So somebody that I don't know that's completely different than me, but it's like we're the same people on the inside. Like, if we met each other, who knows whether or not we'd be friends, but we actually have really similar beliefs and really similar struggles and really similar stories. Just from that one, like, 4-page entry that she had in there. And I just thought that was, like, really cool. And I wish that we could all see each other. The expression I use is naked, but, without the front, without the what my political view is and what my thing that I have to assert. And, if we just were our weak, insecure, just selves, how wonderful that would be to realize how the same we are. So I pick that.
I think you both have set such a high bar for picks. I don't know how we can...
I want to cry now.
Close. Wow. I guess... one of the things I have is, I have an Oculus Rift or whatever, and so one game that's really great for it is something called Super Hot VR. So basically it's this game where it's kind of like The Matrix. It's a little bit more abstract, so it's not like realistic graphics, but the idea is that time only advances if you're moving. And so you'll see someone come up to you, and they'll try to, like, hit you in the head with a bottle, but you can kind of see them coming, and if you stop, you can just sort of think and strategize and think, okay, well, what am I going to do? And so then it becomes almost a puzzle where you're like, okay, so hit the person with the bottle, he's also got a gun, grab the gun, take it, and then sort of direct it somewhere else. And so you're doing these kind of complex, like, sort of moves, really, like Matrix style. But the cool thing about it, I almost get this, because time doesn't advance if you're completely still, and you can look around, of course, but, like, I almost get this sort of, it's not deja vu, but this sensation out of it after you're playing it, where, like, you kind of have a little bit of that expectation that if you don't move, things will just kind of stop around you. You kind of get a vague hint of that, which is really kind of cool. But anyway, it's a pretty awesome experience on the Oculus Rift, I guess.
Cool.
I know Kung Fu.
What you're talking about with I've noticed that as games that are more immersive, when you walk away from the game, your brain still wants.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would love the ability to stop time and just sort of look around, strategize, and then start moving a little slowly. Oh, the bullet's coming. Oh, great. Well, thankfully nobody's shooting at me now, so that's good.
I'm starting to have those experiences with the Switch because it's a handheld console that's motion responsive.
Yeah.
And so I will be moving it, and then when I walk away from it, I have that kind of deja vu experience, like, oh, here's a mountain, I want to climb it, because the only game for the Switch is Breath of the Wild right now. It's the Zelda game, so it's like, and the pictures are real enough, and I'm holding it close enough to my face that I don't know, something about that connection. I get that deja vu stuff too.
Cool. I need to test that, absolutely. So I'm getting back on the softs discussions. That was great end of the speech on the other side of the table. But I would say that my pick is actually family. After being, again, 1 week away, so Mike started smiling.
Boy, you guys are completely going to blow me out of the water. All right, go ahead.
But now, again, being 1 week away from home, I travel here. I'm actually located in Finland. I'm one of the weird guys working in Redmond engineering, but I'm remotely away due to numerous reasons. We're not going to move over. Again, 1 week here, having family there. It actually is pretty tough every now and then. So, and good example is some of our GPMs are right now on the parental leave.
Yeah.
And one of the rules what we always tell for people, family first. The work will wait. It will come. It's not about being super successful unless you have people you can actually appreciate that. And not just partying like we do in some level on these kind of conferences as well. No, honey, we don't actually party at all. It's concentrating on work, right, guys?
That's right.
But really, the value of the family is huge, and being grateful for the family as well. And remembering, giving them time, even though IT business is growing faster and faster, and it's really hard to keep on. I'm personally struggling with my work-life balance. I think everybody is in this business heavily. Well,
one quote I really like is, "No success outside the home will make up for a lack of success inside the home."
Absolutely.
That's a good one. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yep. And finally, I mean, this is our final episode here at Build. I made a contact with somebody who works with Visual Studio Team Services before I came out. And so I was like, hey, I'd like to meet you while I'm here. And so I talked to her right before I came over here. And she just mentioned that a lot of the folks out here that work for Microsoft, I mean, they've been prepping for this for weeks.
Yep.
To be out there and be experts and things like that. And, just make sure that everything lines up, all the demos work and everything else. And so I just want to kind of wrap this up by just pointing out that this isn't just a, hey, rah-rah Microsoft event. I mean, it really is a lot of work by a lot of people to make sure that people get what they need. And so I just basically want to generally thank people like you that are on the Microsoft staff for all the work that you all put in, and giving us the opportunity to sit here and yak with you for a few minutes about SharePoint and how to do the development
and life.
Yeah. Well, but the other things too, you're sharing expertise and yeah.
Sorry.
But yeah, it's just cool to see that, this is what people do, but it's also what people love. And they're willing to put that work in to help other folks out. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having us as well.
Yep. Well, we'll wrap this one up, and we'll be back to our normal, not so live next week.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CACHEFLY.com to learn more.